welcome to 5 Minutes French Grammar Fixes. Bonjour et bienvenue à 5 Minutes French Grammar Fixes. Today we are going to look at the imperfect tense, another form of past tense, which is not quite as used as the perfect tense, but still very much used. Aujourd'hui, on va regarder l'imparfait. You probably already know how to figure out and use the perfect tense, le passé composé, which is quite a complex tense. Now, do you want to hear the good news or the bad news first? Let's start with the bad news. It's not always easy to decide which past tense to use. Passé composé or imparfait, imparfait or passé composé. However, the good news is that it is quite easy to change a verb into the imperfect tense. So let's have a look at that. Look at these sentences and spot the verbs. So I'm sure you got this right. Était, préféré, avait, adoré. If we look at the last letters of these verbs, you can see that they all have AI. You can also see that these endings share some similarities with other tenses that you have learnt already. So like for the je verb, you can see there's an S at the end, just like for RE verbs in the present tense, you've got an S for je at the end. And for the il, you can see the last letter is a T, which is also quite frequent with the third person. And il with an S, you can see there's an ENT, just like in the present tense. Here is your rule for regular verbs. The best way to go about it is to think of your nous form of the verb in the present tense. So if we look at the verb jouer, to play, in the present tense for nous, it goes nous jouons, we play. So then what we do is we remove the present tense ending of the verb, that ONS, and that leaves us with what is called the stem, joue, J-O-U. Okay, so then we add the followings you've got in the table, okay, and we choose those endings depending on the subject of the verb. And remember, the subject of the verb is usually the word which is just before the verb. So it could be a je, a tu, it could be Pierre, it could be Marie, it could be my mum, my dad, les bonbons, whatever, okay. You know, there are quite a few irregular or semi-irregular verbs in French. The good news, though, is that they still follow the same rules regarding the endings. So the trick is to make sure that you know what their stem is, and that you cannot guess. You need to look it up in the dictionary or in the verb table, and then know it by heart. So, for example, the verb prendre, its stem is P-R-E-N. Once you know that your stem is P-R-E-N, you're in business. All you need to do is add the correct endings. Right, I did tell you at the beginning of this tutorial that there was bad news about the imperfect tense, and the bad news is that it's sometimes quite difficult to decide whether you should be using the imperfect tense or the perfect tense. There is one easy instance when you know more or less for sure that you need to use it, and that's when you want to talk about something that used to happen in the past. So it's the repetition of something in the past. For example, when you say I used to play the piano, or it used to be easy to marry a prince, they used to be good friends, etc. The second instance when you use the imperfect tense is when you are describing something that was happening in the past. There is no date attached to it, like with the perfect tense, the passé composé, which refers to a particular time in the past and therefore has to do with recounting, not describing. The imperfect tense is about descriptions. Right, it becomes particularly tricky when we talk about the weather, but the question you always ask yourself is this: am I describing or am I recounting? Description, imperfect tense, imparfait. Recount, perfect tense, passé composé. So in your first example here, you're obviously doing a description, okay? All the things you're talking about are to do with description. Whereas in the second sentence, you're referring to a specific time in the past. You're talking about last year, okay? So last year you went skiing, it snowed last year, it was sunny last year, and when you went skiing at that particular time, you had fun. But when you say it was great, you are describing what it was like. You're no longer recounting. it does not refer to a particular time in the past. You're giving an opinion, you're referring to a feeling that went on for a certain amount of time, but you're not sticking a date on it. Unless you're saying something like, it was great when it started getting warmer. Okay, then you can pin it down to a specific time and it becomes a recount and you use the perfect tense, the passé composé. But not here. You're just saying it was great. Okay, so it's quite general. So I know it's a bit tricky, but with time and practice, you'll get into it and you'll certainly learn some specific phrases which definitely need to be in one tense or the other. Voilà, get practicing now with something like conjuguemos.com. And if you want to know more about in what other instances to use the imperfect tense, check my 5 minutes French grammar fixes, the imperfect tense advanced.